A wife scrolls through social media. A routine evening becomes a nightmare. 7 years after burying her husband, Sarah Reynolds sees the impossible, a photograph that will destroy everything she believes about death itself. Staff Sergeant Michael Reynolds was declared killed in action on October 15, 1998. His body was never recovered. His widow grieved. His daughter grew up fatherless. The military paid death benefits. The case was closed forever. But the dead don't post family photos on Instagram. They don't hold children who call them daddy. Yet there he was, unmistakably alive, unmistakably him, living a life that should not exist. How does a dead soldier resurface after 7 years? What happened in those mountains of Bosnia that the military never discovered? Who covered up the truth, and why? Tonight, we expose one of the most shocking military mysteries ever uncovered, a case where death certificates lie, and the impossible becomes terrifyingly real. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more cases like this, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. October 15th, 1998. The hills of Bosnia-Herzegovina echoed with the distant rumble of artillery fire as Staff Sergeant Mike Reynolds adjusted his radio equipment one final time. The 24-year-old soldier from Cedar Falls, Iowa, had been deployed with the 82nd Airborne Division for 8 months, serving as a communications specialist in the NATO peacekeeping mission. His piercing blue eyes scanned the horizon through the morning mist, the same eyes that had captivated his high school sweetheart, Sarah, 6 years earlier. Back home in Cedar Falls, Sarah Reynolds sat at her kitchen table, her long black hair pulled back in a ponytail as she helped their 7-year-old daughter Emma with her homework. Emma, a miniature version of her mother, with the same dark hair and determined spirit, struggled with her math problems while asking when Daddy would call again. Sarah's heart ached every time Emma asked about Mike's return. The last phone call had been 3 days ago, and his letters had become increasingly sporadic. The morning of October 15th would mark the beginning of what would become one of the most haunting unsolved cases in military history. Mike's unit was conducting a routine patrol along the Serbian border when they encountered unexpected resistance. Radio communications indicated heavy fighting, with Mike's voice being the last transmission received from the squad at approximately 0800 hours. His final words, crackling through static, were barely audible. "Taking heavy fire. Need immediate evac." Then silence. The search and rescue operation launched immediately, with helicopters combing the rugged terrain for any sign of the missing patrol. What they found 3 days later would devastate families across America. The burned remains of their military vehicle told a story of ambush and tragedy. Personal effects scattered across the blast site included Mike's dog tags, his wedding ring, and fragments of his uniform. The official report would later state that the explosion had been so severe that complete identification of remains was impossible. For Sarah and Emma Reynolds, the news arrived on a grey Tuesday morning. The military chaplain and notification officer stood solemnly at their door, their faces bearing the weight of devastating news. The words, "killed in action" and "died serving his country" would forever echo in Sarah's mind. Emma, too young to fully comprehend the finality, kept asking when Daddy would come home from his important work. The funeral service 2 weeks later featured a flag-draped coffin that held only memories, prayers, and the shattered dreams of a young family. The case was officially closed within 6 months. The Department of Defense classified Mike's death as combat-related, awarding him a posthumous Purple Heart and Bronze Star. His name was etched into the memorial wall at Fort Bragg, and his story became another tragic statistic in the ongoing Balkan conflict. Sarah struggled to rebuild her life, eventually moving to Portland, Oregon, where she found work as a nurse and tried to create new memories for Emma, while keeping Mike's memory alive through photographs and stories. By 2005, Sarah Reynolds had constructed a carefully balanced life in Portland. The grief counseling had helped, and Emma, now 14, had grown into a remarkable young woman who carried her father's strength and her mother's compassion. Sarah had never remarried, though she dated occasionally. The memories of Mike remained sacred, preserved in photo albums and the Bronze Star display case in their living room. Emma had learned to live with the absence, though she still wore the small cross necklace Mike had given her before his deployment. The Reynolds family had established new routines and traditions. Every October 15th, they visited Mike's memorial marker at the Portland National Cemetery, where Sarah had installed a commemorative plaque. Emma would leave fresh flowers and tell her father about her achievements in school, her dreams of becoming a doctor, and her mother's unwavering strength. These annual visits provided closure while keeping Mike's memory alive in their hearts. Sarah's life had taken on a predictable rhythm. She worked as a charge nurse at Oregon Health Sciences University Hospital, specializing in trauma care. Her colleagues often remarked on her exceptional ability to comfort families during their darkest moments, never knowing that her empathy was born from personal experience with devastating loss. She had learned to channel her grief into helping others, finding purpose in her profession that honored Mike's memory. Emma excelled academically, particularly in science and mathematics. Her teachers noted her maturity and dedication, qualities that seemed beyond her years. She had joined the school's debate team and volunteered at the local veterans hospital, activities that connected her to her father's legacy of service. Though she had few memories of Mike, she felt his presence in the values Sarah had instilled and the stories shared by his former military friends who occasionally visited. The family's social circle had expanded to include other military families and single mothers who understood the unique challenges of raising children alone. Sarah had found strength in community, participating in support groups and veteran family organizations. These connections provided Emma with positive male role models and gave Sarah the emotional support she needed to navigate the complexities of single parenthood. Technology was beginning to change how people connected and shared memories. Emma had started using early social media platforms, creating profiles on MySpace and Friendster to stay connected with classmates. Sarah remained skeptical of these new digital platforms, preferring traditional methods of communication. She maintained Mike's memory through physical photographs, letters, and tangible keepsakes rather than digital archives. The 7th anniversary of Mike's death approached with the same solemn recognition as previous years. Sarah had planned their usual memorial visit, and Emma had prepared a speech about her college aspirations and how her father's example continued to guide her decisions. Neither mother nor daughter could have imagined that this anniversary would mark the beginning of the most shocking discovery of their lives. March 23, 2005. Instagram had just launched, and social media was transforming how people shared their lives with the world. Emma Reynolds, now a tech-savvy teenager, had convinced her mother to join Facebook to stay connected with extended family. Sarah remained reluctant, but eventually created a profile, primarily to monitor Emma's online activities and maintain contact with Mike's military friends who had scattered across the country after their service. The discovery happened on an ordinary Thursday evening. Sarah was reviewing friend requests when she noticed a suggestion for someone named Michael Johnston with a profile picture that made her heart stop. The image was blurry, but the facial structure and build were remarkably similar to Mike. Her hands trembled as she clicked on the profile, telling herself it was merely coincidence, that grief was playing tricks on her mind. The profile belonged to a man living in New Orleans, Louisiana. His photos showed a life completely different from the one Sarah remembered. Michael Johnston appeared to be in his early 30s, with the same athletic build and facial features that had once been so familiar. But what shocked Sarah most was not the physical resemblance. It was the family photos. Image after image showed this man with a beautiful African-American woman named Paula Johnson and a young girl who appeared to be around 5 years old. Sarah's initial reaction was disbelief, followed by anger at her own desperate hope. She had read about cases of mistaken identity, about the ways trauma and loss could create false hope in grieving families. But as she scrolled through the photos, details began to emerge that she couldn't ignore. The man had a distinctive scar on his left forearm, identical to one Mike had received during training. His smile, the way he held his head, even his posture in family photographs, everything seemed hauntingly familiar. The photos told the story of a man who appeared to have no memory of his previous life. Michael Johnston's earliest posts dated back to 2003, with no references to military service or a previous family. His relationship with Paula Johnson seemed genuine and loving, and their daughter clearly adored him. Comments from friends suggested he had been in New Orleans for several years, working as a construction supervisor and active in his local church community. Sarah spent hours analyzing every detail, comparing current photos with old pictures of Mike. The resemblance was undeniable, but significant differences existed. This man appeared to have never served in the military, showed no signs of combat experience, and seemed to have built an entirely different identity, His social media presence suggested a man at peace with his life, comfortable in his role as a father and partner, with no indication of a hidden past. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming. Sarah found herself caught between rational skepticism and desperate hope. She had built her entire post-Mike life on the foundation of his death, had grieved, healed, and moved forward. The possibility that he might be alive, living a completely different life with another family, challenged everything she believed about loss, memory, and identity. The questions multiplied faster than answers. If this was Mike, why had he never tried to contact them? How had he survived the explosion? And most painfully, how could he have forgotten his wife and daughter completely? Sarah's discovery launched her into a state of obsessive investigation. She printed every photo from Michael Johnston's social media profiles, creating a detailed comparison chart with pictures of Mike from before his deployment. She measured facial features, analyzed body language, and documented every similarity and difference. The evidence was compelling but not conclusive, leaving her trapped between hope and rational doubt. Her first step was contacting the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Army's Casualty Assistance Office. The response was frustrating and bureaucratic. Official records clearly stated that Staff Sergeant Michael Reynolds had been killed in action on October 15, 1998. His case was closed, his death benefits had been paid, and his remains were considered unrecoverable due to the severity of the explosion. Military officials were polite but firm. There was no possibility of error in their records. Emma's reaction to her mother's discovery was a mixture of excitement and skepticism. At 14, she had few clear memories of her father, and the possibility of his survival seemed like something from a movie rather than reality. She helped her mother research, using her superior internet skills to find additional information about Michael Johnston. Together, they discovered that he had no digital footprint before 2003, no educational records, and no documented history prior to his arrival in New Orleans. The investigation expanded to include private resources. Sarah hired a private investigator, David Martinez, who specialized in missing persons cases. Martinez's preliminary research confirmed several disturbing facts. Michael Johnston had no social security number prior to 2003, no military records, and no documented identity before his appearance in New Orleans. His current identification documents all originated from Louisiana, suggesting he had been granted refugee or witness protection status. Medical records proved equally mysterious. Sarah obtained Mike's Army medical files, which documented his blood type, dental records, and several distinctive scars from training accidents. The challenge was obtaining similar information about Michael Johnston without alerting him to the investigation. Martinez suggested that direct contact might be necessary, but Sarah was terrified of the potential consequences. What if this man was indeed Mike, but his memory loss was protecting him from traumatic experiences? What if confronting him caused psychological damage? The emotional toll on Sarah was severe. She struggled to maintain her professional responsibilities while consuming herself with the investigation. Colleagues noticed her distraction and weight loss, but Sarah couldn't explain her situation without sounding delusional. She began seeing a therapist, Dr. Patricia Williams, who helped her process the complex emotions surrounding potential false hope and the possibility of miraculous reunion. Emma found herself caught between her mother's obsession and her own need for normalcy. She watched Sarah transform from a stable, nurturing parent into someone consumed by an impossible dream. The teenager began researching memory loss and combat trauma, trying to understand how her father could have survived and forgotten his entire previous life. Her research revealed numerous cases of soldiers who had experienced traumatic brain injuries, resulting in complete memory loss, but none had involved such dramatic identity changes. The investigation revealed one particularly intriguing detail. Michael Johnston had been found unconscious in a New Orleans hospital in early 2003, with no identification and no memory of his past. Hospital records indicated severe head trauma consistent with combat injuries, but no military connection was ever established. He had been treated for several months, during which time he met Paula Johnson, a nurse who had helped with his rehabilitation and eventual reintegration into society. Paula Johnson's story added another layer of complexity to the mystery. A 28-year-old registered nurse at Charity Hospital, she had been working in the trauma unit when an unidentified man was brought in following a car accident in February 2003. The patient had suffered severe head trauma and showed signs of old injuries consistent with combat or explosion exposure. Most remarkably, he had no memory of his identity, his past, or even his own name. Hospital records revealed that the mysterious patient had been discovered unconscious in the lower 9th ward, apparently the victim of a hit-and-run accident. He carried no identification, and his clothing provided no clues to his identity. Police investigations yielded no missing person reports matching his description, and fingerprint searches through local and federal databases returned no matches. The man existed in a complete void of identity, a living ghost with no past. Paula had been assigned to his care during the lengthy recovery process. Medical examinations revealed extensive old scarring consistent with military service, including shrapnel wounds and surgical scars that suggested combat experience. However, the patient showed no recognition of military terminology, procedures, or culture. His complete amnesia extended to basic skills like reading and writing, which he had to relearn during his rehabilitation. The relationship between Paula and the patient developed slowly during his 8-month recovery. She named him Michael because he reminded her of her late brother, a veteran who had died in a car accident the previous year. The surname Johnston was chosen randomly from a phone book, creating an entirely new identity for a man who had lost everything. Paula's compassion and patience during his rehabilitation created a bond that gradually evolved into romance. Their daughter, Destiny, was born in 2004, bringing joy and stability to Michael's reconstructed life. The family had settled into a comfortable routine in New Orleans' Bywater neighborhood, where Michael worked as a construction supervisor and Paula continued her nursing career. Their community knew them as a loving, interracial couple who had overcome significant challenges, but no one suspected the true mystery of Michael's origins. Sarah's investigation revealed that Michael Johnston had been granted legal identification through Louisiana's Amnesia Victim Protocol, a rarely used legal process that allows the state to provide documentation for individuals who cannot establish their identity. This process required extensive medical documentation, psychological evaluation, and legal oversight to prevent fraud. The thoroughness of the process suggested that Michael's memory loss was genuine and complete. The private investigator Martinez had made contact with former hospital staff who remembered Michael's case. Their descriptions matched Mike Reynolds' physical characteristics exactly, including specific scars and dental work. However, they also noted significant personality differences. The Michael Johnston they knew was gentle, artistic, and deeply spiritual, characteristics that seemed inconsistent with Sarah's memories of Mike's more aggressive, military-focused personality. Dr. Williams, Sarah's therapist, helped her understand the psychological implications of complete memory loss. Traumatic brain injuries could indeed erase entire personalities, creating individuals who retained physical characteristics but developed completely different emotional and intellectual patterns. The possibility that Mike Reynolds and Michael Johnston were the same person, but with entirely different psychological profiles, added another dimension to the already complex situation. Sarah found herself facing an impossible decision. She could continue investigating from a distance, gathering evidence but never achieving certainty. Or she could make direct contact with Michael Johnston, potentially disrupting his new life and family, while seeking answers to questions that might be better left unasked. The weight of this decision consumed her thoughts and dominated her conversations with Dr. Williams. After weeks of internal struggle, Sarah decided that direct contact was the only way to resolve the mystery. She developed a careful plan that would allow her to observe Michael Johnston without immediately revealing her suspicions. Her approach would be gradual, professional, and designed to minimize potential trauma to all parties involved. Sarah's strategy involved traveling to New Orleans under the pretense of a nursing conference. She registered for a legitimate continuing education seminar at Tulane University Medical Center, providing her with credible reasons to be in the city. Emma initially wanted to accompany her mother, but Sarah insisted that the first contact should be made alone. The teenager reluctantly agreed, understanding that her presence might complicate an already delicate situation. The private investigator, Martinez, had provided detailed information about Michael Johnston's daily routines. He worked for a construction company that was renovating historic buildings in the French Quarter, typically arriving at job sites by 7 a.m. and finishing by 4 p.m. His lunch breaks, were usually spent at a small cafe on Magazine Street, where he was known for his quiet demeanor and generous tips. This routine provided several opportunities for casual observation. Sarah's first glimpse of Michael Johnston in person occurred on a humid Tuesday morning in May 2005. She positioned herself across the street from his construction site, ostensibly waiting for a streetcar, while actually studying the man who might be her deceased husband. The physical resemblance was undeniable, the same height, build, and facial structure that had once been so familiar. However, his movements seemed different, more relaxed and fluid than Mike's typically rigid military bearing. The observation continued for 3 days, during which Sarah documented Michael's interactions with co-workers, his lunch habits, and his general demeanor. She noticed that he seemed well-liked by his colleagues, often helping others with their tasks and displaying a patience that seemed inconsistent with Mike's more driven personality. His body language suggested someone at peace with himself, comfortable in his environment and relationships. The crucial moment came when Sarah decided to create a casual encounter. She chose the Magazine Street Cafe, where Michael regularly ate lunch, timing her arrival to coincide with his usual schedule. Her heart raced as she entered the small restaurant, spotting him immediately at a corner table, reading a paperback novel while eating a sandwich. The sight of him, alive and seemingly content, nearly overwhelmed her emotional control. Sarah ordered coffee and selected a table nearby, pretending to review medical journals while actually studying Michael's profile. The angle allowed her to observe his facial features in detail, confirming the distinctive scar on his left temple that Mike had received during paratrooper training. His hands, as he turned the pages of his book, bore the same calluses and finger proportions she remembered from their marriage. The opportunity for interaction came when Michael accidentally knocked over his water glass, and Sarah instinctively moved to help clean up the spill. Their first direct contact was brief, but revealing. His voice carried the same timbre and accent she remembered, though his speech patterns seemed more measured and thoughtful. When he thanked her for her assistance, his blue eyes met hers with no recognition, no spark of familiarity that might have suggested buried memories. The encounter lasted only minutes, but it provided Sarah with the confirmation she both sought and dreaded. This man was physically identical to Mike Reynolds, but he showed no awareness of their shared past. His complete lack of recognition was both heartbreaking and puzzling. Sarah left the cafe with mixed emotions, knowing that she had found Mike, but understanding that the man she had loved might be lost forever, even if his body had survived. Sarah's confirmation that Michael Johnston was indeed Mike Reynolds created a crisis that threatened to consume her entire sense of reality. She returned to Portland, emotionally exhausted, carrying the weight of a discovery that she couldn't share with anyone except Emma and Dr. Williams. The knowledge that her husband was alive, living a completely different life with another family, created a complex web of emotions that defied easy resolution. Emma's reaction to her mother's confirmation was initially excitement, followed quickly by confusion and pain. The teenager had spent 7 years building her identity around being the daughter of a fallen hero, and the revelation that her father was alive but had forgotten her existence was devastating. She struggled to understand how someone could completely lose all memory of their child, their spouse, and their entire previous life. Dr. Williams helped Sarah process the psychological implications of the discovery. The therapist explained that complete amnesia following severe traumatic brain injury was rare, but not impossible. The personality changes Sarah had observed were consistent with damage to specific brain regions responsible for memory formation and personality development. The Mike Reynolds that Sarah had known might literally no longer exist, replaced by a completely different person who happened to inhabit the same body. The ethical dilemma facing Sarah was unprecedented. She possessed information that could potentially restore Mike's memories, but doing so might destroy the peaceful life he had built with Paula and Destiny. Medical literature suggested that sudden memory recovery after years of amnesia could be traumatic and potentially dangerous. There was also the possibility that Mike's memory loss was psychologically protective, shielding him from traumatic combat experiences that might be too painful to remember. Sarah considered her legal options with the help of a family attorney. Technically, her marriage to Mike was still valid, as he had never been legally declared dead, only presumed dead based on military evidence. However, Mike's marriage to Paula, while not legally recognized, was based on his genuine belief in his single status. The legal complexities were staggering, involving questions of bigamy, identity fraud, and the rights of children born to both relationships. The private investigator, Martinez, advised Sarah to consider the potential consequences of revealing the truth. Michael Johnston had built a stable life and family in New Orleans. Paula Johnson had invested years in caring for him during his recovery and building their relationship. Destiny, now a happy 5-year-old, knew Michael as her father and had no knowledge of his previous life. Disrupting this family unit could cause irreparable harm to innocent people. Emma began researching cases of recovered memory and reunion stories, hoping to find examples of positive outcomes. Her research revealed that most cases of dramatic memory recovery occurred within the first year following traumatic brain injury. After 7 years, the likelihood of spontaneous memory return was extremely low. This meant that any restoration of Mike's memories would require deliberate intervention, possibly through hypnosis, therapy, or exposure to familiar triggers. Sarah found herself caught between her own needs and the welfare of Mike's new family. Her love for the man Mike had been conflicted with her recognition that Michael Johnston was a different person who deserved to live his life without interference. The moral weight of the decision was complicated by her responsibility to Emma, who had a right to know her father, but also deserved protection from further emotional trauma. The decision became more urgent when Sarah discovered that Paula was pregnant with her second child. The family was expanding, creating even stronger bonds and making any potential disruption more devastating. Sarah realized that her window for action was closing, and that delaying the decision might ultimately make it for her. She needed to choose between preserving the status quo and risking everything for the chance of reunion and truth. After months of agonizing deliberation, Sarah made the decision that would change multiple lives forever. She would tell Michael Johnston the truth about his identity, but she would do so carefully and with professional support. Her plan involved returning to New Orleans with Dr. Williams, who had agreed to help facilitate the revelation and provide immediate psychological support if needed. The approach required careful preparation. Sarah gathered all the evidence she had compiled: photographs, military records, medical documentation, and personal items that might trigger memories. Dr. Williams insisted on contacting a neurologist specializing in amnesia recovery to ensure that the process was handled safely. The medical team would be on standby to provide immediate care if the revelation caused psychological trauma or physical distress. Emma begged to accompany her mother, but Sarah insisted that the initial contact should involve only adults. The teenager's presence might complicate the situation and potentially traumatize her if Michael's reaction was negative or if no memories returned. Emma reluctantly agreed, understanding that her mother was trying to protect her from additional emotional pain. The confrontation was scheduled for a Saturday morning at a neutral location, a conference room at Tulane University Medical Center. Sarah had convinced Michael to attend by claiming to be a researcher studying amnesia recovery and requesting his participation in a case study. Paula accompanied him, supportive but curious about the unusual request. Dr. Williams was present as a professional observer, ready to intervene if necessary. Sarah's hands trembled as she began the presentation. She started with general information about Michael's case, describing his arrival at the hospital in 2003 and his remarkable recovery. Michael listened politely, occasionally glancing at Paula, who held his hand supportively. The atmosphere was professional but tense, with Sarah struggling to maintain her composure as she prepared to reveal the truth. The moment of revelation came when Sarah presented the first photograph, Mike's official army portrait from 1998. Michael's reaction was immediate and dramatic. His face went pale, his hands began to shake, and he stared at the image with an expression of profound confusion. Paula gasped, recognizing the identical appearance but not understanding the implications. The resemblance was undeniable, shocking in its exactness. Sarah continued with additional photographs, showing Mike with his unit in training and, most powerfully, with Sarah and baby Emma. Each image seemed to hit Michael like a physical blow, causing him to grip the table for support. His breathing became labored, and Dr. Williams moved closer, monitoring his vital signs and emotional state. Paula demanded explanations, her voice rising with fear and confusion. The truth emerged gradually, with Sarah explaining Mike's military service, their marriage, Emma's birth, and his presumed death in Bosnia. She described the explosion, the unsuccessful search, and the 7 years of mourning that had followed. Michael listened in stunned silence, occasionally touching his face or examining his hands as if seeing them for the first time. His reaction suggested not recovered memory, but rather the shocking recognition of a life he had never known he had lived. The medical team intervened when Michael began experiencing what appeared to be a panic attack. His vital signs became erratic, and he showed signs of severe psychological distress. Dr. Williams immediately began calming techniques while the neurologist assessed his condition. Paula, now understanding the magnitude of the situation, alternated between comforting Michael and demanding answers about what this meant for their family. The session ended with Michael being sedated and admitted to the hospital for observation. The neurologist confirmed that while he showed no immediate signs of memory recovery, the psychological shock of learning about his previous life had caused significant stress. Paula was devastated, realizing that the man she loved had a wife and daughter who had been mourning his death for 7 years. The complexity of the situation was overwhelming for everyone involved. The revelation of Michael Johnston's true identity as Mike Reynolds created a media sensation that neither family was prepared to handle. News outlets picked up the story of the dead soldier found alive with a new family, turning a private tragedy into public spectacle. Sarah found herself besieged by reporters, while Paula and Michael were forced to deal with unwanted attention and speculation about their relationship. Michael's recovery from the psychological shock was slow and complicated. He remained hospitalized for a week, while doctors monitored his mental state and assessed the possibility of memory recovery. During this time, he experienced fragmented dreams and unexplained emotional reactions that suggested his subconscious mind was processing the newly revealed information. However, no clear memories of his previous life emerged. Paula faced an impossible situation. The man she loved and had nursed back to health had a legal wife and daughter who had legitimate claims to his attention and affection. Her pregnancy added another layer of complexity, as she was now carrying the child of a man who might be psychologically unavailable to her. The legal implications were staggering, involving questions of bigamy, insurance fraud, and the custody rights of multiple children. Sarah's relationship with Emma became strained as the teenager struggled to understand why her father couldn't remember her. Emma had built up fantasies about potential reunion, imagining tearful recognition and immediate restoration of their father-daughter bond. The reality that Mike was physically present but emotionally unavailable was more painful than his presumed death had been. Dr. Williams worked with all parties to establish a framework for moving forward. The immediate priority was Michael's psychological stability, which required minimizing stress and pressure while allowing him to process the information at his own pace. This meant limiting contact with Sarah and Emma while ensuring that Paula and Destiny felt secure in their relationship with him. The legal complications were addressed through family court mediation. Sarah's attorney argued for recognition of her marriage and Emma's inheritance rights, while Paula's lawyer focused on protecting her relationship with Michael and ensuring financial support for Destiny and her unborn child. The case was unprecedented, requiring judges to balance competing claims while considering the welfare of all children involved. Michael's employer and community rallied around him, providing support and protection from media intrusion. His co-workers established a fund to help with medical expenses and legal fees, while his church provided counseling services for both families. The local community's response was overwhelmingly supportive, recognizing that Michael was a victim of circumstances beyond his control. The medical team continued monitoring Michael for signs of memory recovery, but the neurologist warned that the chances were minimal. 7 years of established neural pathways had created a new personality and identity that were unlikely to change dramatically. The man who had been Mike Reynolds was gone, replaced by someone who shared his body, but not his memories or essential character. Emma began seeing a specialized therapist who helped her understand that her father's amnesia was not a rejection of her, but a medical condition beyond anyone's control. The teenager slowly began to accept that she might never have a traditional father-daughter relationship with Mike, but that didn't diminish her worth or his original love for her. Sarah faced the most difficult adjustment, recognizing that her husband existed but was no longer accessible to her. The man she had loved was gone, replaced by someone who was kind and gentle, but fundamentally different. She had to grieve the loss of Mike while accepting that Michael deserved to live his life without the burden of expectations based on memories he couldn't access. 2 years after the revelation, the three families had found a way to coexist in an arrangement that honored everyone's needs, while accepting the limitations imposed by Michael's condition. The legal issues had been resolved through an innovative settlement that recognized Sarah's marriage while protecting Paula's relationship and ensuring financial security for all the children involved. Michael had chosen to remain in New Orleans with Paula and their children, Destiny, now 7, and their son Marcus, born 6 months after the revelation. His decision was based on the practical reality that this was the only life he remembered and the only family he truly knew. However, he developed a relationship with Sarah and Emma that was respectful and caring, even if it lacked the intimacy of their original bond. Sarah had found peace in understanding that love sometimes means letting go. She maintained her nursing career in Portland, but visited New Orleans regularly, developing a friendship with Paula that was based on their shared love for the man they both called husband. The relationship was complicated but genuine, with both women recognizing that they were connected by circumstances beyond their control. Emma, now 18 and preparing for college, had developed a unique relationship with her father. She called him Michael rather than Dad, acknowledging that he was biologically her father, but accepting that he couldn't fulfill the traditional paternal role. Their connection was based on shared interests in reading and construction work, activities that allowed them to bond without the pressure of recovered memories. Paula had initially struggled with resentment towards Sarah and Emma, feeling that their presence threatened her family's stability. However, she gradually came to understand that Sarah's years of grief and Emma's loss of her father were genuine tragedies that deserved compassion. The two women eventually became allies in protecting Michael from external pressures while ensuring their children's welfare. The media attention had eventually faded, but the case had contributed to important advances in understanding traumatic brain injury and amnesia recovery. Medical professionals used Michael's case as a teaching tool, helping other families understand the possibilities and limitations of memory recovery. The story also highlighted the need for better support systems for military families dealing with ambiguous loss. Michael had found ways to honor his military service without recovering specific memories. He volunteered at veterans organizations, participated in Memorial Day ceremonies, and supported military families even though he couldn't remember his own service. His instinctive understanding of military culture suggested that some aspects of identity persisted even when memories were lost. Emma's college essay about her father's amnesia and her family's journey toward acceptance was published in a national magazine, helping other families dealing with similar situations. Her mature perspective on love, loss, and adaptation inspired readers and demonstrated the resilience possible in the face of seemingly impossible circumstances. Sarah eventually began dating again, recognizing that her life couldn't remain frozen in the past. She found love with a fellow nurse who understood her complicated family situation and supported her ongoing relationship with Michael's family. The new relationship was built on acceptance of the past while embracing possibilities for the future. The story of Mike Reynolds and Michael Johnston became a testament to the power of love to transcend traditional boundaries and expectations. Three families had learned to function as an extended unit, connected by shared history and mutual respect. While the fairy tale ending of complete memory recovery never occurred, they had created something equally valuable, a new definition of family based on choice, compassion, and the understanding that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is the freedom to be who they have become rather than who they used to be. Their journey proved that healing doesn't always mean returning to what was lost, but rather finding new ways to love and connect that honor both the past and the present. In the end, Mike Reynolds had died in Bosnia, but Michael Johnston had lived to love again, and that was a miracle worth celebrating. If you've made it this far and want to see more stories like this, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any stories. Leave a like so we can keep sharing more stories like this. See you next time.